we have our 512 participants listening in. So let's jump right into goal 4. If it's possible, this might be the goal that I have received the most feedback about, that caregiving that works, that caregiving has been so centered and lifted in our plan. So I am so eager to quickly introduce it and then hear from the 3 of you about goal 4, caregiving that works. We will be prepared, we will be prepared for and supported through the rewards and challenges of caregiving for aging loved ones. And one of our targets here is 1 million high quality, good caregiving jobs. But when you look at the strategies, we talk about both family caregiving, and that's family of choice, of course, family and friend caregiving, as well as that paid caregiving jobs and virtual care, a really growing area, of course, during the pandemic. To lead us in this discussion, we have 3 enormously brilliant and collaborative panelists that I'm grateful for each of you, especially for your time on such a historic day. Secretary Julie Su, Secretary for the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency. Elizabeth Fuller, standing in for her boss, and we're so grateful for you to do that. Chief Committee Consultant for Adrien Nazarian from Los Angeles, from the Assembly Committee on Aging and Long-Term Care, and Dr. Donna Benton, Director of the USC Family Caregiver Support Center and a member of, well, Donna, I think you were on every single one of the master plan stakeholder committees. So thank you for that. The stakeholders, long-term services and supports, research, and equity, if I remember right. So the way we've been doing this forum is 3 questions. We start with a question about the big, bold 10-year vision. Then we move to what do you want to get done this 2-year session? We've got a 2-year state session, of course, federal session, 2-year to kind of think about goals. And then we'll do a lightning round to finish with what are you going to get done this next 100 days, your 100-day commitment. So with that, we'd like to start with the Secretary, of course. And Julie, could you open and tell us where you are with this vision on caregiving and what you think about as such a genius in this area? So please take it away.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Kim. Well, we are all following your lead as the director and having done such a tremendous job on this whole plan. So I wanted to thank you first, acknowledge you. And I think the easiest commitment to make is that we will continue to be your partner as we roll out recommendations and try to get results to meet the challenges. But just as a few grounding comments, I will say that what we knew before the pandemic has only been tragically underscored over the last 10 months, which is that quality care is dependent on quality jobs. Low pay and low quality jobs means at least 2 things. 1, it's difficult to attract people to this work. And 2, that the people who choose it often have to work 2 or more jobs to make ends meet. And so the lack of protections on the job, the lack of paid sick leave, for example, has meant that people have, gone to work when we would have otherwise, the guidance said that it was better for people not to have done so. And again, these are factors that existed before the pandemic, but the pandemic just exposed how tragically important it is to take care of the workers who take care of everybody else. So I'll say that a couple of things about what we know. 1 is that that better jobs do mean better care. There was a leading age report called Making Direct Care Work Pay that said that if we were able to raise direct care worker pay to at least a living wage by 2022, then by 2030, again, looking at the mandate to think about 10-year goals, that we would add $3.6 million in economic output, that we would have over 51,000 new jobs, and that we would save over $160 million in public assistance savings. So looking at costs holistically, I think that's a really important part of what we want to do. So in terms of what we're going to do in the short, actually, I'm sorry, do we just all do opening statements and then get to the questions about the next 100 days?
You're on mute, Kim.
Here I am, sorry, mute and construction in my neighborhood. I was going to follow your lead. You're on a roll, so go from your long-term vision to how we get started. I appreciate that.
Okay, no, that's great. So, so definitely in terms of looking to how we reach that long-term goal of understanding that there is just a deep connection between the quality of jobs and the quality of care. I would say, and also to the recommendations that were given, right? Which is how do we develop a highly valued, high quality long-term care workforce? How do we establish direct caregiver workforce development, right? Making sure that we're training. Those things really go hand in hand. One of the priorities of this administration is to really focus our workforce development on training toward quality jobs, on making sure that we are investing in the high road. So one of the ways that we're doing that in the short run, in the first 100 days, is we're working very closely with Kim and on various stakeholders across the administration to bring together employers, workers, and government to help identify how to address the most urgent needs that we have. We do believe deeply in a broad-based stakeholder engagement plan. We do think that, where we have labor and management at the table together, planning for the future of an industry, we get better results. We hear all of the voices. So that's a really important part of, that we want to bring to the care industry also. Again, we still have significant COVID challenges. So, while we are rolling out vaccines to this vulnerable population, I think it also creates more opportunity for us to think about, beyond COVID, what are we going to do to ensure safety, security for both the workforce and for those who are cared for. I want to also note that these efforts are very much in line with the Biden-Harris administration's plan to make nursing homes and long-term care facilities safe. So the idea is that as much as we in California can continue to lead through our example and through our efforts, we also create more opportunities, not just here, but in proof of concept and demonstrating how things can work in the rest of the country. The second thing I'll just say is that we are really looking to allocate and shore up resources for workforce development programs at a shared table. So really working with labor and management, the unions, the care facilities to look at specific regional needs for workforce development, so that we know that California is many regional economies, and the needs of the workforce and for caregivers and those who are cared for differ from region to region. So we want to make sure our workforce investments really match the need. And then the last thing I'll just mention is that we're really spearheading some exploration of alternative models of direct care work. And some of those were discussed, brought to the table by many stakeholders, but looking at how do we engage direct care consumers and workers to look at innovative models. And again, this will put California at the forefront of in funding that's going to come out of the federal government for these kinds of innovations. So in everything from private home care to residential care, trying to explore different models for how we upgrade the quality of the job at the same time that we upgrade and then measure the improved quality of care. So I'll stop there and wait to hear from my co-panelists, and then excited for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz, can you give us the perspective from the legislature and the Aging and Long-Term Care Committee? Both. Let's do both. How about the 10-year vision, and what's top of mind for this 2-year session we just started?
Well, first, I'm a placeholder like they have at the Oscars. I mean, I'm not really a co-panelist, Julie Sue, but I am filling in and will do my best. So caregiving is something that, while I'm new to the aging space, is something that I think when you talk about, over a lifetime, what caregiving needs are, they're very, very similar in how much we revere those who take care of our most vulnerable, whether it's that newborn child or whether it's your beloved parent. And I think that, a long-term goal for me personally is I would like to see our elders held with more reverence. We see it in multicultural homes. I think that we can talk about income inequality being a reason that people live multi-generationally, but it's also something that you take as a part of your heart, that families who have a reverence for those who grow older, whether in My mother is, her mother was from China. My husband's family is from Hawaii. And the way that you care for your ohana throughout life is very, very important. But I also think that we need, if we start to revere those who are growing older for the wisdom that they have, I think that we also, it by nature starts to revere the caregivers who are taking care of them. And that's something that's really lacking. And I think that whether it's a family caregiver that we're recognizing the important role that they play as an unpaid caregiver, they should have all of the access to training and tools that those who choose this as a profession, because they're doing the same work. They're just doing it in a way that's more personal. So I think that as we're moving in those long-term goals, it's that we're recognizing the importance and the important space unpaid caregivers play in our economy. We don't often talk about that. We talk about how important it is for the health and well-being of those they're caring for, but we're not talking about how much it's saving our bottom line. But those who choose caregiving as a career, I'd like to see that there's a better pathway to advancement, to better pay, and to a career that is held in high regard and is fulfilling. And I think that everyone who does a caregiving role in the state right now is doing so, and is doing so without care for their health and well-being. They're low paid, they have low wages, but also in how we see them in the greater economy. We're not giving them the care that they deserve. I think that if we really link all of the wages that we're paying to our caregivers in our value system, and that again links back to how much we value those who are growing older and what they add to what they've added to the workforce in their lifetime, what they add to our families. Doing so really helps us see those caregivers and value the jobs that they're doing. Growing older inevitably requires caregiving of some type, whether it's short-term or whether it's long-term. And I think that if we start to add that into our greater thinking of what does it mean to grow older, at some point I might have a short-term caregiving need. But if there are other jobs someone can have, as delicious as I think a rotisserie chicken is at Costco, if the person that's doing that job is making more and has more financial security in the long run, than those who are taking care of our most vulnerable, we have our values in a way that's not reflective. I think that if we give more reverence to our caregivers, their health and well-being is better overall. I think that we need to be looking at that in that way. But a bigger issue is our unpaid caregivers also need to feel that as they are workers in the workforce, that they can acknowledge that they are workers in the workforce that have a caregiving responsibility. And as employers, we recognize that. We recognize those needs, that to be whole and to feel better that all of our family is taken care of. That sometimes impacts whether we're able to be present in our job from 9 to 5. And certainly working from home has showed us that we can pivot. We've had to. At times it seemed like we shouldn't. And I know in my line of work, it was never something that we thought we were going to be doing, but now we must. And so I think that employers need to really recognize that honoring someone who has a caregiving responsibility and giving them the space to do so ultimately makes them more loyal employees and happier in the long run. And I think that if we start to look at family caregiving as something that's very normal, then it becomes something that's more accepted. You want me to go into really quickly what I think we may do?
Yeah, I'm really,
okay.
I'm struck by, again, how COVID really is, I think, changing people's thinking, experience. As Secretary Sue said, some of it's not new, but some of it is being felt and new in different ways. And some of it is new. So yes, I would love to hear bills, budgets, opportunities. What do you see?
Well, I really was interested when you just said how we access virtual care. I think that when we're talking about it's very, very hard for most of us to really understand the deserts that exist in the state of California. And sometimes they can literally be just miles away, just over the foothills. There are spaces that are literally in our backyard that are our neighbors, that are the same children that go to school with our children, who live in a space that there is literally no access to the internet. And it's hard to imagine that they're happening near very urban spaces, but they are. I think it's hard to use older Californians as that link, but it's being discussed in every district in the state of California is how this is impacting our children. So I think, every age lives in every space, that we don't need to create this as our own conversation. We need to find ways to piggyback on a conversation that's already happening. And in doing so, it helps us really reframe that every policy area that we're looking at, we need to say, how does this impact older Americans and people with disabilities as well as this population that it's hoping to impact? Because I think it's very, very important. I just feel like it's already being talked about, and it's being talked about with a population that really has a strong pull for legislators. And so we just find a way to insert ourselves in that conversation rather than trying to create a new space. I think that every legislator is trying to find a way to help those who are older in their districts. And it's just really difficult. Right now, I think we feel like we have the whole year ahead of us, but it's January. And what December looked like, it's different right now. So our calendar, as we're moving forward, we're going to, we have been encouraged to have a shorter number of bills. And what I was really, what I was impressed by when I saw the master plan release last week is how it's already starting. It's talking, you had already laid the groundwork. This was not the first conversation that would say, let's talk with Julie Sue and let's figure out a bill idea. You were all in agreement when you released this, that these things needed to happen. So in the next 100 days, I really feel like our greatest impact is going to be in the budget. A lot of the things that we want to work on take money to start. They don't magically happen. They need someone to do them. They need a personnel year to be created. State government it's not just money sometimes, it's that you have to create that space for someone to work on this program. But it also would mean that Donna needs to see an increase because people are keeping their loved ones at home rather than there's not a pipeline right now for skilled nursing because we want to keep our elders at home. But how do we do that if I'm not trained to do so? And if I'm not trained to do so, she needs to find a way that she needs a little bit more money this year so she can help push out that training. I want to see in the next 100 years, lots and lots of folks letting us know there is one-time money. This is not going to be here forever. And its intention is to help us get through this pandemic. The training that may happen for unpaid family caregivers is something that doesn't mean that they're trained and magically as soon as COVID is over, we put people in a fantastic congregate living space. It may be that this is the right choice for these folks to be home or to find ways that you'll have multiple family members care. But I certainly think that California is absolutely 100% a leader in innovation. And we have science and we have technology and we're so proud of it. And we always talk about how we lead. But bringing it back to caregiving, the one thing that we forget to be proud of is how much human touch impacts our lives. And that's what caregiving is really about. And I think that we need to make sure that in our budget, we ensure that those who need that human touch are getting it. And that goes back to training, that goes back to people who are doing these jobs, and that goes back to wage so that they can do this job whether part-time or full-time, and feel that they can care for their own families. And as they grow older, they'll actually have some financial stability. So I really feel like the budget's the place where a lot is going to happen right now.
So Dr. Benton, you've heard the spectrum. You've heard paid caregiving, family caregiving, virtual care. Can you pull us together and tell us what you see both in the 10-year and also in this 2-year opportunity?
In listening to what everyone is saying, I am so proud of California for deciding to uplift and really spotlight caregiving. This was something, California is in a very unique position because they had spotlighted caregiving since 1984. They were the first state, we are already been the first state in the nation to have a system of caregiver resource centers that had already, they're looking at that. And I think what this master plan is really pulling together for us is it's really extending that commitment on the issue of caregiving so that we really are, as generation after generation, we become better prepared for really a longevity boom. We are all living longer. And with this longevity, as we've already said, at some point, we're going to need a caregiver. We're going to be a caregiver. We're going to know a caregiver. And that's kind of quoting Rosalind Carter. So when we have this goal of having the caregiving that works, that means that we really are improving the quality of life for all of us. And because it is, as Julie already said, it's fundamental in our society to be a caregiver. And I think that for our next 10 years, that as we continue to push out training and education, that it's also important to understand the juggling that caregivers experience, that they're balancing many roles. And in balancing those roles over the next 10 years, we have to have a comprehensive system so that they don't have to go through a maze to find what they need. So the more over the next 10 years, the more that we can break down the often siloed set of services that are for the care receiver, but also for the caregiver. I think the other thing that really stood out in this plan is that we have to work on assessing and identifying caregivers, because most caregivers don't self-identify. We're talking about the caregiver, but they're not self-identifying. So we have to continue in the next 2 years. I think that was important in that we're going to have the ADRCs, and we're going to have Alzheimer's Association. We're going to have the caregiver resource centers that will all begin to find tools that will help people self-identify, and that once we identify them, then we can get the caregiver the need, the education, the training, the social support, the financial support that they need so that they can continue what they want to do, which is help their family member. And I think so this is why this 10-year plan is so important. And the focus on income opportunities that may not be there for low income families is also, I think, has really highlights the fact that we have generational approaches to caregiving, some within low income families, but we should not exclude those that aren't necessarily low income, but because we don't want to perpetuate generations of people that lose income and then aren't able in the next generation to gather generational wealth. So we have to look at low income families, but we also need to look at those just above, because I know in our system, we're at that middle income, people who, I don't need a lot, but I just need some respite, or I just need a little help in getting the legal things together. And they're working. And because people are working, often that cuts them out of a lot of services. So we don't want to force people down into poverty, into the safety net, but kind of shore up those holes so that they can continue on and keep the journey longer, because everyone's living longer and we're going to need care longer. And that's why it's so great that we have a 10-year plan. In the next 2 years, I'm really going to be working on what everyone else has been talking about, which is helping with training for the workers, for the family caregivers. And then later on, I want to talk more about technology and how that's going to work with caregivers, but I'll answer that at a different time.
Well, thank you all. And Donna, you bring to mind one of the recommendations, initiatives is number 8 in the housing, is this model of adult family homes, where the notion that a family could receive compensation to care for 1 or 2 adults in their home. which could be a family member. It could not be a family member. But to your point about different models, respecting multi-generational and informal kinship care networks, but also creating, to Secretary Sue's point, those sometimes family caregiving can be the first step on a caregiving career ladder. And how do we help people build the skills, build the wages, build the benefits? Well, I'm super excited, Donna. Thank you for reminding us of the history, and Julie for reminding us of the future with our new administration, the commitment to a caregiving agenda. I'm going to put you on the spot for your 100-day commitment. What are you and we and everyone on the phone, what are we doing in the 100 days to move the caregiving agenda forward? Secretary Sue, start with you.
Well, I guess I'll pick up on what my two colleagues that inspired me to say. One of the things in the budget, in the governor's proposed budget, is funding for something we call SEED, Social Entrepreneurs for Economic Development. The specific idea behind that is to create micro grants and technical assistance for people who normally face barriers to good employment, but to think creatively about how to address income opportunities, as you all have said. And the one thing we expect, one piece of that is going to be an innovation grant component, where we expect that there will be home care givers who will come forward and seek funding in order to establish what they're already doing, right, as a, in an entrepreneurial fashion, to again, allow them to do what many are already doing. Again, right? Yeah, we know this is a workforce that is largely women and women of color who just, like they roll up their sleeves and do the work. And so trying to find concrete avenues to give them some sense of that stability and support to be able to create a foundation for themselves, and to advocate for themselves, really, for the income and security and other kinds of benefits that they should have. So just to be very concrete about your question, that is one thing that we're going to be really focused on in the budget and then in the next 100 days.
Oh, I love bringing the entrepreneurial angle in. That's terrific. Liz, how about you? 100 days. You can't stay on mute. We're putting you on the spot.
Well, I just think that we need to start looking that any proposals that could potentially impact older Californians or people with disabilities, we are always using that lens. So if it's a housing bill, I think that we need to bring to light how this could impact this population. If it's technology, it's bringing that up in technology. If it's food insecurity, we're bringing it up as to food insecurity. I think that one area in the budget, because I'm just going to hammer that it's all going to happen in the budget, is so many areas that impact older Californians have run successfully because people volunteer. And what we saw in COVID is that volunteers were often seniors themselves. And so an enormous part of the base of what you had to run your programs with a shoestring budget, and I know Donna is a part of that. We've had these conversations before. In a recession, you scale back these programs that primarily impact better jobs for women. You cut them back to where they barely can survive. They're at bare survival, and then you will start to grow them. But then when they take 10 years to get back to pre-recession budgets, you act as though that's a big success. But COVID showed us when you don't have the volunteer base, you have to hire people, and you never had that as part of your budget before. So as this kind of unknown future with COVID, I think that we need to build back a lot of budgets that needed drivers to get food out, because that was never a part of it, that paid for food containers in scenarios where it was congregate meals. Now you're making sure it's refrigerators, all of those things that were never a part. We have to keep those as part of the conversation in the budget. And then it's just making sure that we fund.
Thank you. This is a big issue in the senior community. The good jobs piece, the volunteer piece, the family piece, how we make sure all of those pieces are firing appropriately. So thank you for surfacing that. That has been a real challenge. Donna, you get the last word. What's your 100-day commitment? Or you can turn it on all of us, of course.
Well, actually, a commitment to work with EDD to make it easier for the family to take paid family leave. I think that we really need to continue to look at that system. I think we have the goal in there around caregiver assessments. And if we're going to identify caregivers, then we have to collaborate with systems that are already in place that know how to provide the programs the caregivers need, including and access in a multiple of ways. I think COVID really has shown that we have this gap in the safety net, and the caregivers sometimes were not able to provide basic care needs because they were not seen as essential workers. When 80% of the care and of people are in the home, and yet they're not prioritized for vaccines. They're taking somebody who is an older adult, and then they sit there and they get the vaccine, and then the person who has to go to the store and work and keeps going in and out of the house can't get a vaccine. So the more that we raise it, as Liz said, elevate the position of caregivers. So I'm really committed to working on every goal that mentions caregivers, and even those that don't, in the plan.
Well, thank you. On that note, I think that's absolutely right. Liz, you said it as well. Caregiving is really throughout. And so I think we have called the question and lifted up, but now there's so much work to do to make it real. And I'm so grateful and know we'll get there with all of you working in that direction. So thank you very much. We are now going to pivot to our fifth and final panel, affording aging. This may have been one of the first topics that I did a deep dive in, thanks to the Commission on Aging's wonderful panel over a year ago in Los Angeles at the LGBTQ Senior Center, where we really looked into declining mobility as we age. And so today, to dive into affording aging and do our three questions, I want to welcome my friend and my colleague, Director Kim Johnson, Director of the California Department of Social Services, and a champion for families of all ages across the lifespan, as well as Kevin Prindeville, Executive Director of Justice in Aging stakeholder. While their pictures are coming on, if I can ask my team to go back one slide so we can just spend a minute on Goal 5, affording aging. We will have economic security for as long as we live. And our target is to close the equity gap, the racial equity gap in, and the gender equity gap in, and increase elder economic sufficiency, the ability to afford housing and health and basic needs as designed by UCLA. So with that, team, can we see Director Johnson and Kevin Prindeville? As they are coming, I will let them know, I don't know, if particularly Director Johnson, if you've been able to be here all day, but there has been enormous interest in homelessness and the work of Project Home Key and many of the other efforts that your department has led in the COVID response. So your ears may have been burning, but I think we were waiting for you to talk more about that in detail as you see fit. And Kevin, welcome. We weren't given the events of the day. Legislative colleagues were not able to join us, but we are so grateful that you are and know you will lead us in a deep and rich conversation. We are going to do our three-question round, and if you could, I'll start with Director Johnson with a response to the kind of the big 10-year approach around equity and economic sufficiency, and looking at those strategies around elder homelessness, of course, poverty, hunger, nutrition, and weighing in on the vision would start us off would be great. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Director McQuaid. It's a pleasure to be with you all, and just want to give a tremendous appreciation for all of you who are listening in and tuned in now and have been part of this tremendous thought partnership to develop this plan, and in your leadership, Director McQuaid. It's fantastic. And so I think my initial reactions to looking at the goals and strategies in this particular area is just how great that there is alignment across areas. So I'll mention a few things in that space in terms of really looking at ending homelessness for older adults. As hopefully everyone knows, this is a huge priority for this administration and this governor, and certainly for the Secretary of Health and Human Services Agency and myself. So it's showing up in things like Project Room Key, where during the very early stages of this public health emergency and pandemic, we looked at who was going to be kind of at greatest risk of severe consequences. Of course, as the plan outlines, we also knew at that point that those over 50 were the fastest growing portion of those that were unsheltered in communities. that we have disproportionate share of African American and other populations represented. So again, Project Room Key was really thinking through those at greatest risk and having a solution that was hotels and motels, which still over 10,000 individuals are supported in today. We have served over 23,000 individuals to date in that effort. And of course, it's not stopping at the supports and sheltering for the COVID positive elder, or those that are as a preventative measure for those that would have the greatest negative consequences. But it's also about rehousing strategies so that when these individuals are exiting the hotels and motels, they're actually getting the case management, supportive service connections that lead to a more permanent housing solution. So that's things like Project Home Key, where there's been acquisition of these sites and other sites and communities, et cetera. So that's an example of how that's showing up and how we are aligned in that space of recommendations. Of course, in terms of income securities, we are a partner and again, proud champion in California of the Earned Income Tax Credit. So what are the ways when we have these phenomenal and robust arrays in our safety net programs, what are the ways that we are making those engagement and connections to those services more streamlined and easier to access? And that's a huge commitment. I would also say in terms of that space, our alignment and commitment with you is to look at any of these new funding streams, whether they be coming federally or something that we're creating, but we're looking at not only who is going to be served by these additional economic supports, but who is not. And so where as California, we have identified, like, for example, our immigrant elders and our disaster relief assistance for immigrant program, where we've identified a population of our California residents aren't able to access this relief. So it's also looking at who's not served by some of these supports and what we can do to address the gaps. In terms of protection from poverty and hunger, just want to again appreciate an effort, Director McQuay, that you led when you were formerly at the department, our expansion of CalFresh to SSI recipients. We have more older adults getting CalFresh than ever before, up and over 750,000 in 2020 and growing. And our enrollment in CalFresh among those over 60 has gone up 135% in just the past couple of years. And of course, that connection to CalFresh was even more essential during this public health emergency. So it was the pathway to get connected to additional supplemental supports that the federal government provided in terms of emergency allotments. It's also which has totaled $1.8 billion across the state to date. But it's also been the pathway to things like online groceries. So we've been able to do, in California was the first approved here to do EBT online purchasing, which allowed those on CalFresh to actually use Amazon and Walmart and Safeway, and we'll continue to grow the retailers in that project to have that home delivery and allowing them to stay home and remain at home and avoid exposure in COVID. So again, kind of across all three of these areas, we certainly have many, many places where we're aligned. We're excited about that. I would also just obviously point out the overarching priority around equity, around data, around engagement are things that we share and hold true in terms of our values. I think I would just say, after it's been a very rough couple of weeks for this country and beyond that, I would just say, though, I think it's going to be the thought partnership that's certainly been exemplified in this effort that's going to help California set us apart, that we can come together as community to identify these solutions to support each other. So really grateful to see that focus and priority areas of the plan as well.
Thank you. Kevin, reflections and response on the overall 10-year vision.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Director McCoy-Way. You must be exhausted from all the work that went into this plan, and then at the end of a very long but very informative summit today. So thank you for all of your work, and Director Johnson and so many of the leaders across HHS and across the cabinet, especially Secretary Galley and FIG and others who have been with us through this process. And I also want to thank all the stakeholders that have been such incredible partners and active, engaged members through this whole process. And I think, looking broadly at the plan, I'm very proud of it. I'm very impressed by the work that Director McCoy-Wade and the cabinet did to really build a framework, which I think touches on all of the critical items that the aging and disability advocates and service providers have talked about for years, elevates a framework that then creates a lot of opportunity for us to work in collaboration with the Newsom administration, as well as with the legislature and with local, as you've talked about, Kim, local cities and counties and all kinds of partners to really advance this new vision we have for aging in California. So I think overall, really impressed by that framework that we've created that creates these doors and openings for a lot of action now together. And I really appreciate that the concept of affording aging is elevated as one of the critical elements of that framework. I think that goal, is exactly right, and placing it alongside these others is appropriate. I think that the goal does a nice job of balancing something that Donna referred to, that really addressing the needs of a wide variety of Californians, recognizing that increasingly people that during the time that they're working consider themselves middle class, but as they're aging, they're actually aging into greater economic insecurity and even poverty. So that the goal is inclusive of creating more economic security for those families, as well as for families that we traditionally think of as living in poverty. And appreciate that the goal has specific strategies around homelessness and hunger and people living in deep poverty in California. I really also like that in the kind of preamble of the goal, California owns that we're not doing well here. As Director Johnson talked about, we have high rates of homelessness among people 50 and over. As the plan talks about, California has the second highest rate of senior poverty in the country. So I think we have to confront those realities, and especially the role that racial inequities play in creating that dynamic. The plan does a good job of calling out that we have higher rates of poverty among women, among Black, Latinx, Native older adults, because of the systemic inequities they face throughout their life. So I think the goal does a nice job of framing us up for opportunities in action. And I think too that Goal 5, as I read Goal 5 and tried to reflect on elements of Goal 5 to pull out, there's elements in all the other goals that also relate to our goal of affording aging and creating economic security in California. So housing is obviously a critical element, and the action that we take in the housing goal will be so important to achieving goals and affording aging. Similarly, in healthcare and LTSS, in the goal around equity, in the goal around workforce, all of, and caregiving, all of these goals build towards helping us achieve the goal in Goal 5 around affording aging. So a lot to work on. That's great, and I think some things that we'll be pushing for to make even more specific. It's important that we set goals from here on out that really push us to do some things that are new and different and bigger and bolder. The trend lines are very negative in this area. The trends are towards more Californians aging into poverty, among deepening economic inequality. So we need bold goals. We need bold action to get us there. That's going to require investments. Some of the issues in the master plan can be addressed in a variety of ways, and to help people out of poverty, out of homelessness, out of hunger requires investment, requires dollars. So we're going to be looking for ways that we can fill this framework with even more specificity and even more investments to help us get to the big, broad goals. So that's some.
Let's do that. Let's get specific.
Yeah.
Let's get specific about the next 2 years. And I want to turn to Director Johnson, because Director Johnson led the End Child Poverty effort for the department that really was in many ways an inspiration for this effort to me in many ways, and thinking about how to lead it and listen and significantly lead to action. That effort that you led did lead to action the next 2 years. And so I'm wondering, as you think about the next 2 years, obviously still in the pandemic, but a momentous legislative session for our state and the federal level, but also as you mentioned, are in this moment of racial reckoning and racism and racial injustice and a crying out for justice. And we know that our elders who are experiencing some of the deepest poverty and deepest homeless, that is one of the legacies of a lifetime of racism and racial discrimination in employment and housing, education, incarceration. What are the top priorities for the next 2 years to really seize the moment and turn this from a vision to action? Director Johnson, start with you.
Sure. And I think Kevin was alluding to this a bit too in the comments, because I would say it spans kind of across this plan and not just in this area. But again, when we really are thinking about supports for housing, and to your point, Director, absolutely what we're seeing at the when we look at root cause and we think about the history of many policies over years, in some places we are looking at the undoing of policy as well as the creation of new. And I would just say that one thing that we have certainly learned over the course of this last year is to take the moments within this public health emergency as accelerants. Where can we move things forward? Where can we move the conversation forward? And so one thing I would just highlight is a budget proposal that we will be engaging with all of you on as we are continuing to craft the design of it. But that is focused on a $250 million investment on acquiring the residential care facilities for the elderly and adult residential facilities as part of that long-term services in care continuum, right? We have, again, going back to, of course, what we need more of, but what we have built, right? We have in-home supportive services that provide that level of care and support. We have, at the highest level, skilled nursing facilities, right? And our adult and senior care facilities are certainly part of that continuum too. So how can we, just as we did in Project Roomkey, where we were thinking about, well, wait a minute, not only do we have this need, we have hotels and motels vacant across our state. Well, here, we recognize that we are both losing some capacity in our adult and senior care facilities were prior to the pandemic. So, but we also recognize there will be a change in the real estate potentially, right? So how can we, again, similar to the Home Key effort, really have an all-in focus on acquisition capital to make sure that we can have spaces and supports and good environments for our elders as they age and those with disabilities as well. So it's about both acquiring those facility types, but also rehabbing, where we also recognize that we need some additional supports to fund that, and especially for those settings who are caring for our SSI recipients, those who are low income and needing that, really relying on that support as a core foundation. So that is a proposal that we, again, will be engaging with you on as we shape, but something we certainly hope we're implementing over the next couple of years. And then I guess I would say, more broad, and hopefully I wasn't able to join you for the first panel on the housing component, but hopefully that was there again, that we are looking at the multitude of investments and leveraging these investments to think about, again, what kinds of housing supports we have more broadly, especially affordable housing across the board. And again, as I mentioned, really focused on these opportunities to rehouse and to also, of course, on the economic side, prevent the need for having more unsheltered individuals across our state. So that's a huge piece. I would also note that over the next couple of years, we've just kind of supported new and efficient ways that we are thinking about food distribution. And so obviously I just have to shout out all the food bank partners across the state who have been a tremendous level of support. We'll continue that work both on how we can support our food banks and have many, many partners who have been working with us on that effort, but also how we're thinking about food distribution more broadly, senior food boxes, it's Great Plates. It's all of these ways in which we are ensuring that we don't have any of our elders hungry at the end of the day. So again, I would say right now we're currently averaging a little over 180,000 food boxes a month across the state. And that's tremendous. In the last few months in particular, of course, during the holidays that we've seen tremendous need, but that'll be a continued focus of ours of just thinking through how we're really weaving and integrating these efforts together with that common goal and objective in mind. And then the other piece I'll highlight here is just kind of doubling down on our CalFresh outreach, including how we are very mindful and thoughtful about language access. We've been doing a lot of work in this space across the department and across this administration on how we are making all of our information and connection again to services, whether they be food supports, housing supports, or otherwise, how we're making those both, of course, culturally competent, but actually linguistically accessible. Are people able to understand what we're offering and take us up on that offer? So certainly a commitment over the next couple of years to continue growing out and expanding our language access components.
Kevin, what's on your list for this 2-year window?
Well, I have to say all of that sounded fantastic, and we're certainly excited to work on anything that the administration is going to be prioritizing. One of the wonderful gifts we think this master plan creates is so much energy and activity out of the administration and opportunities for us to engage. I'm so excited to see that. I ended last time I spoke by saying that we think that there's some areas where we can get even more specific about goals, and I think one of those is in the area of the equity gap. So this goal talks about closing the equity gap and increasing economic security. And we think there's more work to do to define what we mean by the equity gap and which of these initiatives are really going to help not just broadly create economic security, but close that equity gap. So we're excited by initiatives like 124, 126, and 128 that relate to the Cal Savers and Cal Able programs that call on us to do some analysis to see if we can identify inequities and take up rates in those programs, and the Cal EITC as well. So I think that kind of work, we're happy to be part of that work in those programs. And then I think those same type of equity analysis could be more broadly applied to other programs that the administration runs, whether it's some of the programs in Director Johnson's purview, like the CalFresh program, and really excited to hear about the emphasis on language access. But what else can we do to understand potential inequities in CalFresh or IHSS or in the Medi-Cal program or in SSI and SSP. So I think that's a place where we really want to do work in the next 2 years. Also, a priority for us for a long time has been around increasing the state supplemental payment to SSI. So we're excited to see that in there as Initiative 129, at least opening the door for continued work there. And we're going to be working closely with Californians for SSI to put asks in front of the legislature and the governor. And ask should have arrived in your mailbox while we were on the summit, Director Johnson, and it was sent to legislative leaders as well, asking for an increase in the SSP to be part of the Golden State stimulus. That if we're providing extra stimulus from the state right now, it's the proposal is defined by people that are part of the Cal EITC program, and we have an opportunity to also do targeted support for people on SSI. Let's get them relief that's desperately needed right now. So that's a 2 years, 100 days, next 10 minutes item that we're working on. Also, we're excited about the initiatives 117, 118, 119, many of which Director Johnson touched on around building off of Home Key to really go deep on homelessness among older adults, and particularly 119, thinking about leveraging the IHSS program. And we've had some success with some county partners doing that, and we think that there's a lot to build on there. And then we really like to Initiative 130, which also Director Johnson referred to some, is kind of what can we do to double down on and rethink and organize the way that we do nutrition support for older adults and build almost maybe another plan, another kind of a mini plan around nutrition there. So we're excited to be part of that. We're also in these next 2 years going to be looking at things that we think are missing from the plan so far, where we can go deeper, bolstering the Elder Index as a tool for us, looking at ideas around pilots for voucher programs to help older adults facing homelessness. We had a lot of ideas in the stakeholder recommendations around Medi-Cal affordability and expanding Medi-Cal eligibility. So we'll be working with the legislator on ideas around that in this legislative session, things on like asset tests, expansion of Medi-Cal eligibility for undocumented older adults. So we think there's a lot to do there together. And then, issues that, like I said at the start, that aren't in this goal area, but are initiatives in other areas that touch on these issues here. We're going to be very involved in the work around the Elder Justice Council, around the healthcare ideas, the housing ideas, and also the leadership ideas. I think those are critical. I might say that's also some 100-day ideas is that we do move forward with the Impact Council and with the leadership in the governor's office and in other places, so that we're really starting to get those key leadership pieces in place to help advance this framework.
Okay, then, lots of alignment, lots of energy, lots of things. I love Director Johnson building on what's already in place as well as moving it forward. So here comes the 100-day commitment. In your first 100 days of the master plan, what commitment do you want to make, or do you want to ask from the community here?
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of both. I appreciate the invitation for both. So certainly I would just say that, again, as I mentioned, part of the way that we can address homelessness in California is prevention. So we are absolutely in the next 100 days committed to leveraging the existing resources. We have Home Safe that supports those who have maybe come through the door through the Adult Protective Services. We have a Housing Disability and Advocacy Program, which is also that connection to SSI and SSP. So we want to make sure we're leveraging every dollar and fund source to prevent eviction for any of our elders along the way. And certainly we've been working with our county partners on that effort. And to Kevin's point, IHSS Plus, and thinking about the resources that in the workforce that IHSS is providing to those. Again, we have actually even seen some partnership in counties with IHSS and our room key effort, for example. So we want to make sure we're leveraging and maximizing that. I also want to note that very good news, and something that, again, you worked on, Director McCoy-Wade, in your CalFresh hat. We have received official waiver at the federal level to support what I would call simplifying. It's eliminating reporting requirements for households where all members are disabled with no earned income. So we'll be working to completely eliminate those reporting requirements, called SAR 7 for those of you in the weeds, in the next few months here, to make the ability to maintain the connection to CalFresh easier for our elders. Would also just, of course, note the budget proposal, and that is where I'd also ask for your engagement. We will have a series of stakeholder conversations as we're looking to further flesh out that proposal that I mentioned related to adult residential facilities and residential care facilities for the elderly. And then I would also just say a couple more things here is the federal transition. Obviously, that's a huge opportunity. So again, to your point, Kevin, on the need for additional resources, the federal resources are a big part of our ability to respond in California, to leverage what else we can here in the state. So we have a lot of places where we'll be looking to focus on that, and also move policy that we have in common and are aligned. And certainly part of that is also, again, EITC. So again, getting that word out, or promoting EITC as one of those components. And of course, we also just have to continue leading through, when we're talking about equity in the space, not only putting first our elders and those with disabilities, but then how does that shape, as we are working together on vaccinations, how does it shape access to the things that we know are critical right now in supporting, again, the healthiest environments and people across our communities. So we want to continue to lead there and be a champion in those spaces. And again, we'll need your continued. I will continue to ask for thought partnership in these unprecedented times. We have to come together and hear what the needs are on the ground, and be in touch and connected in those ways to further our efforts. So really, really, again, want to lift up and applaud the effort and all of you who have been engaged in this master plan. It's been tremendous. And those of you who've gotten to know quite a bit more over the last year, opportunity and crisis in terms of the ways that we work together and that we're addressing those needs. So I really want to appreciate everyone for their effort in this space.
Thank you so much, Kim. And I actually think it's fitting that Kevin will get the last word here of the day. Kevin has been a key convener of the stakeholder partnership across departments, across months. And so, Kevin, what's your 100-day commitment? And then we will be joined by Deputy Secretary Marco Meach to wrap the day. But Kevin, 100 days.
Yeah, and I have to confess, I'm having a particular trouble these days thinking the difference between 2 years and 100 days. It's all kind of one foot in front of the next. But certainly continuing to play a leading role in organizing stakeholders. I guess I should say that first and foremost. Justice and Aging is very much committed to continuing to engage advocates and others outside of the wonderful work that's happening within the administration in order to kind of provide the expertise and the input and the push necessary to move things forward. So we're going to be very involved there in the next 100 days and beyond. We're also very committed to engaging the administration on a variety of these initiatives. I guess one that I would highlight in particular is working on the Elder Justice Council idea. We've been very involved in developing ideas there and really hope to see that get off the ground within the next 100 days. We're also committed in these next 100 days to engaging the legislature. So we're helping organize a group of aging and disability advocates to put together a legislative agenda full of ideas that help push and promote the initiatives that are laid out here in this plan, so that the legislator can also get engaged and be involved here. So look out within the next 100 days for kind of a document that's summarizing a lot of initiatives that are out there for the legislators that want to be involved in this as well. And so a lot of partnership there. And in that, we're going to be pushing for this Golden State stimulus for people on SSI. We're going to be pushing a broader SSP budget ask. We're going to be pushing for healthcare bills and a wide variety of other ideas that partners are bringing to the table. And then we're going to be engaged at the federal level. We're hopeful that within the first 100 days of the Biden administration, we'll see legislation, a reintroduction of the SSI Restoration Act, which would help improve the SSI program at the federal level, which would also provide relief to people in California. We're working on legislation with partners that would create a mandatory benefit for home and community-based services in the Medicaid program, which would help, would have some financial incentives and also help with California's efforts to provide more care at home and in the community. And so we're going to be very engaged as a national organization at the federal level. And an ask we'd have for the administration is to really follow through in the elements of the master plan that talk about initiatives to play a role in that federal policy making. It would be tremendously influential for a governor of Governor Newsom's credibility and stature and status to spend some of that political capital talking about the issues in this master plan related to caregiving and home and community-based services and investments in Social Security and SSI. That's really a place where that would be powerful and influential. So we'll be doing that pushing, and we really welcome the governor's collaboration in that as well.
Excellent. And I want to thank you both for all the partnership, the laser focus on equity and inclusion. And also, I think both of you said the word hope. So that is welcome to hear that we know we have some tough times and some hard work to build back better, but there is a lot of hopeful signs, and you two are certainly a big part of that. So thank you very, very much. I'm going to ask our wonderful team to do the bring our transition to our closing speaker, who I'm so glad got to hear some of that critical discussion about equity and opportunity and state and federal partnership. And that's the one and only Marco Meach, Deputy Secretary of the California Health and Human Services Agency. Marco, are you with us for the close? As you come off of mute and into the room, we'll give you just a second. Let's see. Can you unmute Marco from your end, Maria and team, Nancy?
No, we can't. Marco, I don't know if you're with us. The mute button
He says
is.
he's here. I can text him and I can see him. So we're just having a technical difficulty to mark the moment here for a second. Bear with us for just a second. He's been listening for a while. Okay, we have a solution that will take us about 60 seconds to work. So Marco, as soon as you are here, start speaking, wave your arms as needed. We will go to the next slide and I will let folks know a couple of next steps and trust that we will get over this as well. So lots of questions in the chat about next steps, and we want to say the most important thing you can do is to stay engaged in the newsletter. And that's not just we're not saying that just to promote the newsletter. It is truly because we are co-creating and co-evolving this plan with all of you, particularly in response to the COVID pandemic. So we launched the plan. We have laid out this framework. We know that budget season has begun, bill season has begun, federal inauguration session will beginning next week. So we wanted to lay the framework and the foundation out today and have this roundtable of leaders and advocates from all around the state to reflect on the framework and how it can be built out and built better. But questions have come in about when will the local playbook piece roll out, and we will be rolling that out in coming weeks and months in partnership with counties and cities and area agencies on aging in ways that make sense and work, again, given the continuing pandemic and also the urgency around this work. We've also had questions about the various committees, whether it's elder justice or impact, and again, news will be coming out around those in coming weeks and months as we move, get that organized. So there will be much more to come, and including the recording to this today, and all of the resources from this event will be sent out that way as well. So really, we mean it. That's our way to engage. We'll be providing continuing updates on our website. There have been improvements to accessibility since it was launched last week, and those will continue to improve. We'll have a new version of the print document that is even further accessible. So more improvements coming on accessibility and language as well. So stay tuned there for all the latest and greatest as the master plan does move from the planning stage, this moment of summit, to the implementation stage. And with that, I want to try it again. I do see Marco Meach, I believe, is here.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you and see
Awesome.
you. And I just gave all the logistical updates, so you really get to do the grand finish now. So
awesome. Well, thanks. And I am sorry that Dr. Galley is not able to join you all. He is very swamped with all things vaccines at the moment. And so he sends his regrets. But I do want to take a moment and just say how grateful I am to so many of you who have been part of this journey that has been over a year plus in the making. And I want to start first and foremost by saying thank you to all of the folks across the state who have really engaged with us. And I think that when we set out to pull together the Together We Engage campaign, we did not expect the outpouring of feedback that we received and the engagement that we received. So first and foremost, to Californians all across the state, thank you. I also want to extend a huge thanks to a number of partners and stakeholders who I think really took this as an opportunity and ran with it. And many of the people who are on the Master Plan for Aging Stakeholder Advisory Committee, your time, your counsel, your advice over the past year has really been heartwarming, and it's something that we at the state are unbelievably grateful for. Earlier, I was in and out listening to the webcast, and I think it was Maya who said, well, we're organizing ourselves regularly, and I think that's probably Kevin Prindeville, who's the lead organizer on that front, and they're meeting regularly. And it just, I think, is a testament to just the dedication and commitment of the individuals that we've assembled from various walks of life to really come together to help us build what we call a California for all ages. And so I am really proud of that. I also hope that you saw today the breadth and depth of our response with regards to this particular topic. And I think you saw it both in how we're responding as a whole of government. This is not just a health and human services effort. You saw Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez earlier talk about housing and homelessness. You saw Secretary Julie Su talk about labor issues. This is not an issue that's just within our agency. It's a whole of government response as directed by the governor. More importantly, I think you also saw that this is not just a Department of Aging piece within our own agency. And you just heard from my dear colleague and friend, Kim Johnson. See, the two Kims, that's just too difficult. Kim Johnson, you heard from J.C. Cooper earlier from the Department of Healthcare Services. So really, we're looking at this more holistically across our agency. And I am unbelievably grateful to the Department of Aging and Kim McCoy-Wade and her leadership. We really could not have done what we've done over the course of the last year without her and the team at the Department of Aging. I am so proud to see how the Department of Aging is transforming. This is just the beginning of our journey. We have a lot more to do with all of you. And I do also want to take a moment to also acknowledge the legislature. You heard from various members today. We purposefully engaged with the legislature early in the process. We went into districts with them. We heard from their constituents. We heard from them. We look forward to engaging with them as we begin the process of the deliberation with regards to the governor's budget proposal and all the other things that are forthcoming with regards to this particular piece. I do want to just kind of talk to the moment, and I think what really is happening across the country in Washington, D.C. Is heart-wrenching to some extent, but I think this work gives us hope that we can build a more inclusive, more just state together. And so I think it's upon all of us to carry this mantle for the very many people that came before us who have talked about this vision for some time. I know that friends and colleagues like Debbie Toth and others who often tell me that this is something they've been working on for many, many, many years, and they've put their professional lives really at the focus of helping older people. And I just don't want us to lose sight of the moment that we have. I would encourage all of you to not nitpick at the little things. There might be things that you might not like as part of the master plan. You might not like the logo. You might not like the design. You might not like one of the recommendations. You might not be happy about, all of the accessibility issues that we came out with right away. But just step back for a moment and think about what we've been able together to accomplish. And so I just would urge each of you to take a moment and realize kind of how far we've gotten. I also want to talk about for a moment how the disability community and the aging community really have come together in a profound way here. And too often these communities have felt and worked separately. And the fact that we are seeing the synergy is really important. And I think it's imperative that you not stop that. It's imperative that you think about how we think about older people and people with disabilities holistically with an equity lens all throughout it. And so I just think that this is the very beginning of what I believe is going to be really our effort to bolster our not only government efforts, but non-government efforts around how we build a more inclusive state. And I think we set out to do something pretty powerful. We did not want to build a master plan that sat on a shelf in Sacramento, collected dust. We really wanted to build something that was user-friendly, that spoke to the challenges and the moment, that held us, the state, accountable, and more importantly, engaged all different sectors. This is not just a plan for state government to implement. This is a plan for all of us, whether you're in the private sector, whether you're the nonprofit sector, whether you're in philanthropy, to really think about what role you play. And I love how Kim really talked to each of you or all the panelists about, what are you going to do in the next 100 days? What role are you going to play in the next 100 days? So I will close by just saying we all have an obligation and a duty, whether it's an older family member that we have, an older neighbor that we have. We all are aging ourselves, and that's partly the reason behind the idea of a California for all ages. We all have a duty and an obligation to make a commitment over the course of the next 100 days to really take on the various pieces of what we've done together over the past year and really move the needle on the very important topics we've discussed today. Just let's not get caught up in the little minutia. Let's continue to think about what is ahead of us. Let's continue to make sure that we work together across sectors and across disciplines to make sure that we're delivering for older Californians all across the state. So this to us is just the very beginning. I know that this has been quite a difficult journey, particularly because most older Californians have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. They have been isolated in ways that have been unprecedented. And so I think it's upon us all to really roll up our sleeves and now get to work. So Kim, I'm grateful to you. I am grateful to all of the secretaries and department directors, to the Master Plan for Aging folks, to our funders who really made this possible. We couldn't have done it without you. And I just hope that you join us in the journey that is ahead for us.
Thank you, Marco, for closing our summit with those words of inspiration and equity and commitment to a California for all ages, and most of all, the call to action. With that, this ends our summit. Thank you all. Be safe, be well, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and we'll be working together very, very soon. Thank you.